Chapter 8. The twin-engine Learjet 60 touched down on the scorching runway. Outside the window, the barren landscape of Spain's lower Extremadura blurred and then slowed to a crawl. "Mr. Becker," a voice crackled, "we're here." Becker stood and stretched. After unlatching the overhead compartment, he remembered he had no luggage. There had been no time to pack. It didn't matter. He'd been promised the trip would be brief, in and out. As the engines wound down, the plane eased out of the sun and into a deserted hangar opposite the main terminal. A moment later, the pilot appeared and popped the hatch. Becker tossed back the last of his cranberry juice, put the glass on the wet bar, and scooped up his suit coat. The pilot pulled a thick manila envelope from his flight suit. "I was instructed to give you this." He handed it to Becker. On the front, scrawled in blue pen, were the words, "Keep the change." Becker thumbed through the thick stack of reddish bills. "What the—" "Local currency," the pilot offered flatly. "I know what it is," Becker stammered, "but it's too much. All I need is taxi fare." Becker did the conversion in his head. "What's in here is worth thousands of dollars." "I have my order, sir." The pilot turned and hoisted himself back into the cabin. The door slid shut behind him. Becker stared up at the plane and then down at the money in his hand. After standing a moment in the empty hangar, he put the envelope in his breast pocket, shouldered his suit coat, and headed out across the runway. It was a strange beginning. Becker pushed it from his mind. With a little luck, he'd be back in time to salvage some of his Stone Manor trip with Susan. In and out, he told himself. In and out. There was no way he could have known. Chapter 9. Systems Security Technician Phil Chartrukian had only intended to be inside crypto a minute, just long enough to grab some paperwork he'd forgotten the day before, but it was not to be. After making his way across the crypto floor and stepping into the SysSec lab, he immediately knew something was not right. Side note, I can't find my copy of Digital Fortress because I'm not at home, so this copy is from archive.org, online library. So if there's any issues, like it's edited wrong or something, that's the reason. Anyway, end of side note. The computer terminal that perpetually monitored Translator's internal workings was unmanned and the monitor was switched off. Chartrukian called out, "Hello?" There was no reply. The lab was spotless, as if no one had been there for hours. Although Chartrukian was only 23 and relatively new to the SysSec squad, he'd been trained well and he knew the drill. There was always a SysSec on duty in crypto, especially on Saturdays when no cryptographers were around. He immediately powered up the monitor and turned to the duty board on the wall. "Who's on watch?" he demanded aloud, scanning the list of names. According to the schedule, a young rookie named Seidenberg was supposed to have started a double shift at midnight the night before. Chartrukian glanced around the empty lab and frowned. So where the hell is he? As he watched the monitor power up, Chartrukian wondered if Strathmore knew the SysSec lab was unmanned. He had noticed on his way in that the curtains of Strathmore's workstation were closed, which meant the boss was in. Not at all uncommon for a Saturday. Strathmore, despite requesting his cryptographers to take Saturdays off, seemed to work 365 days a year. There was one thing Chartrukian knew for certain. If Strathmore found out the SysSec lab was unmanned, it would cost the absent rookie his job. Chartrukian eyed the phone, wondering if he should call the young techie and bail him out. There was an unspoken rule among SysSec that they would watch each other's backs. In crypto, SysSecs were second-class citizens, constantly at odds with the lords of the manor. It was no secret that the cryptographers ruled this multi-billion-dollar roost. SysSecs were tolerated only because they kept the toys running smoothly. Chartrukian made his decision. He grabbed the phone, but the receiver never reached his ear. He stopped short, his eyes transfixed on the monitor, now coming into focus before him. As if in slow motion, he set down the phone and stared in open-mouthed wonder. In 8 months as a SysSec, Phil Chartrukian had never seen Translator's run monitor post anything other than a 00 in the hours field. Today was a first. Time elapsed, 15 hours, 17 minutes, 21 seconds. 15 hours and 17 minutes? He choked. Impossible. He rebooted the screen, praying it hadn't refreshed properly, but when the monitor came back to life, it looked the same. Chartrukian felt a chill. Crypto Sysex had only one responsibility: keep translator quote-unquote clean or virus-free. Chartrukian knew that a 15-hour run could only mean one thing: infection. An impure file had gotten inside translator and was corrupting the programming. Instantly his training kicked in. It no longer mattered that the Sysex lab had been unmanned or the monitor switched off. He focused on the matter at hand: translator. He immediately called up a log of all the files that had entered translator in the last 48 hours. He began scanning the list. Did an infected file get through, he wondered? Could the security filters have missed something? As a precaution, every file entering translator had to pass through what was known as Gauntlet, a series of powerful circuit-level gateways, packet filters, and disinfectant programs that scanned inbound files for computer viruses and potentially dangerous subroutines. Files containing programming quote-unquote unknown to Gauntlet were immediately rejected. They had to be checked by hand. Occasionally, Gauntlet rejected entirely harmless files on the basis that they contained programming the filters had never seen before. In that case, the Sysex did a scrupulous manual inspection, and only then, on confirmation that the file was clean, did they bypass Gauntlet's filters and send the file into translator. Computer viruses were as varied as bacterial viruses. Like their physiological counterparts, computer viruses had one goal: to attach themselves to a host system and replicate. In this case, the host was translator. Chartrukian was amazed the NSA hadn't had problems with viruses before. Gauntlet was a potent sentry, but still, the NSA was a bottom feeder, sucking in massive amounts of digital information from systems all over the world. Snooping data was a lot like having indiscriminate sex, protection or no protection. Sooner or later, you caught something. Chartrukian finished examining the file list before him. He was now more puzzled than before. Every file checked out. Gauntlet had seen nothing out of the ordinary, which meant the file in translator was totally clean. So what the hell's taking so long? He demanded of the empty room. Chartrukian felt himself break a sweat. He wondered if he should go disturb Strathmore with the news. A virus probe, Chartrukian said firmly, trying to calm himself down. I should run a virus probe. Chartrukian knew that a virus probe would be the first thing Strathmore would request anyway. Glancing out at the deserted crypto floor, Chartrukian made his decision. He loaded the viral probe software and launched it. The run would take about 15 minutes. Come back clean, he whispered. Squeaky clean. Tell Daddy it's nothing. But Chartrukian sensed that it was not nothing. Instinct told him something very unusual was going on inside the great decoding beast. Chapter 10. Ensai Tankado is dead? Susan felt a wave of nausea. You killed him? I thought you said we didn't touch him. Strathmore assured her. He died of a heart attack. Comint phoned early this morning. Their computer flagged Tankado's name in a civil police log through Interpol. Heart attack? Susan looked doubtful. He was 30 years old. 32, Strathmore corrected. He had a congenital heart defect. I'd never heard that. Turned up in his NSA physical, not something he bragged about. Susan was having trouble accepting the serendipity of the timing. A defective heart could kill him just like that. It seemed too convenient. Strathmore shrugged. Weak heart. Combine it with the heat of Spain. Throw in the stress of blackmailing the NSA. Susan was silent a moment. Even considering the condition, she felt a pang of loss at the passing of such a brilliant fellow cryptographer. Strathmore's gravelly voice interrupted her thoughts. The only silver lining on this whole fiasco is that Tankado was traveling alone. Chances are good his partner doesn't know yet he's dead. The Spanish authorities said they'd contain the information for as long as possible. We only got the call because Comint was on the ball. Strathmore eyed Susan closely. I've got to find the partner before he finds out Tankado's dead. That's why I called you in. I need your help. Susan was confused. It seemed to her that Ensai Tankado's timely demise had solved their entire problem. Commander, she argued, if the authorities are saying he died of a heart attack, we're off the hook. His partner will know the NSA is not responsible. Not responsible? Strathmore's eyes widened in disbelief. Somebody blackmails the NSA and turns up dead a few days later, and we're not responsible? I'd bet big money Tancado's mystery friend won't see it that way. Whatever happened, we look guilty as hell. It could easily have been poison, a rigged autopsy, any number of things. Strathmore paused. What was your first reaction when I told you Tancado was dead? She frowned. I thought the NSA had killed him. Exactly. If the NSA can put 5 Rhyolite satellites in geosynchronous orbit over the Mideast, I think it's safe to assume we have the resources to pay off a few Spanish policemen. The commander had made his point. Susan exhaled. Ensign Tancado is dead. The NSA will be blamed. Can we find his partner in time? I think so. We've got a good lead. Tancado made numerous public announcements that he was working with a partner. I think he hoped it would discourage software firms from doing him any harm or trying to steal his key. He threatened that if there was any foul play, his partner would publish the key and all firms would suddenly find themselves in competition with free software. Clever, Susan nodded. Strathmore went on. A few times in public, Tancado referred to his partner by name. He called him North Dakota. North Dakota? Obviously an alias of some sort. Yes, but as a precaution, I ran an internet inquiry using North Dakota as a search string. I didn't think I'd find anything, but I turned up an email account. Strathmore paused. Of course, I assumed it wasn't the North Dakota we were looking for, but I searched the account just to be sure. Imagine my shock when I found the account was full of email from Ensign Tancado. Strathmore raised his eyebrows, and the messages were full of references to Digital Fortress and Tancado's plans to blackmail the NSA. Susan gave Strathmore a skeptical look. She was amazed the commander was letting himself be played with so easily. Commander, she argued, Tancado knows full well the NSA can snoop email from the internet. He would never use email to send secret information. It's a trap. Ensign Tancado gave you North Dakota. He knew you'd run a search. Whatever information he's sending he wanted you to find, it's a false trail. Good instinct, Strathmore fired back, except for a couple of things. I couldn't find anything under North Dakota, so I tweaked the search string. The account I found was under a variation, N Dakota. Susan shook her head. Running permutations is standard procedure. Tancado knew you'd try variations until you hit something. N Dakota's far too easy an alteration. Perhaps, Strathmore said, scribbling words on a piece of paper and handing it to Susan. But look at this. Susan read the paper. She suddenly understood the commander's thinking. On the paper was North Dakota's email address, ndakota@ara.anon.org. It was the letters ARA in the address that had caught Susan's eye. ARA stood for American Remailers Anonymous, a well-known anonymous server. Anonymous servers were popular among internet users who wanted to keep their identity secret. For a fee, these companies protected an emailer's privacy by acting as a middleman for electronic mail. It was like having a numbered post office box. A user could send and receive mail without ever revealing his true address or name. The company received email addressed to aliases and then forwarded it to the client's real account. The remailing company was bound by contract never to reveal the identity or location of its real users. It's not proof, Strathmore said, but it's pretty suspicious. Susan nodded, suddenly more convinced. So you're saying Tancado didn't care if anybody searched for North Dakota because his identity and location are protected by ARA? Exactly. Susan schemed for a moment. ARA services mainly U.S. accounts. You think North Dakota might be over here somewhere? Strathmore shrugged. Could be. With an American partner, Tancado could keep the two passkeys separated geographically. Might be a smart move. Susan considered it. She doubted Tancado would have shared his passkey with anyone except a very close friend. And as she recalled, Ensign Tancado didn't have many friends in the States. North Dakota, she mused, her cryptological mind mulling over the possible meanings of the alias. What does his email to Tancado sound like? No idea. Coleman only caught Tancado's outbound. At this point, all we have on North Dakota is an anonymous address. Susan thought a minute. Any chance it's a decoy? Strathmore raised an eyebrow. How so? Tancado could be sending bogus email to a dead account in hopes we'd snoop it. We'd think he's protected and he'd never have to risk sharing his passkey. He could be working alone. Strathmore chuckled, impressed. Tricky idea, except for one thing. He's not using any of his usual home or business internet accounts. He's been dropping by Doshisha University and logging onto their mainframe. Apparently he's got an account there that he's managed to keep secret. It's a very well-hidden account, and I found it only by chance. Strathmore paused. So, if Tancado wanted us to snoop his mail, why would he use a secret account? Susan contemplated the question. Maybe he used a secret account so you wouldn't suspect a ploy. Maybe Tancado hid the account just deep enough that you'd stumble onto it and think you got lucky. It gives his email credibility. Strathmore chuckled. You should have been a field agent. The idea's a good one. Unfortunately, every letter Tancado sends gets a response. Tancado writes, his partner responds. Susan frowned. Fair enough. So, you're saying North Dakota's for real? Afraid so, and we've got to find him, and quietly. If he catches wind that we're onto him, it's all over. Susan now knew exactly why Strathmore had called her in. Let me guess, she said, you want me to snoop ARA's secure database and find North Dakota's real identity? Strathmore gave her a tight smile. Ms. Fletcher, you read my mind. When it came to discreet internet searches, Susan Fletcher was the woman for the job. A year ago, a senior White House official had been receiving email threats from someone with an anonymous email address. The NSA had been asked to locate the individual. Although the NSA had the clout to demand the remailing company reveal the user's identity, it opted for a more subtle method, a tracer. Susan had created, in effect, a directional beacon disguised as a piece of email. She could send it to the user's phony address, and the remailing company, performing the duty for which it had been contracted, would forward it to the user's real address. Once there, the program would record its internet location and send word back to the NSA. Then the program would disintegrate without a trace. From that day on, as far as the NSA was concerned, anonymous remailers were nothing more than a minor annoyance. Can you find him? Strathmore asked. Sure. Why did you wait so long to call me? Actually, he frowned. I hadn't planned on calling you at all. I didn't want anyone else in the loop. I tried to send a copy of your tracer myself, but you wrote the damn thing in one of those new hybrid languages. I couldn't get it to work. It kept returning nonsensical data. I finally had to bite the bullet and bring you in. Susan chuckled. Strathmore was a brilliant cryptographic programmer, but his repertoire was limited primarily to algorithmic work. The nuts and bolts of less lofty secular programming often escaped him. What was more, Susan had written her tracer in a new crossbreed programming language called Limbo. It was understandable that Strathmore had encountered problems. I'll take care of it, she smiled, turning to leave. I'll be at my terminal. Any idea on a time frame? Susan paused. Well, it depends on how efficiently ARA forwards their mail. If he's here in the States and uses something like AOL or CompuServe, I'll snoop his credit card and get a billing address within the hour. If he's with the university or corporation, it'll take a little longer. She smiled uneasily. After that, the rest is up to you. Susan knew that the rest would be an NSA strike team cutting power to the guy's house and crushing through his windows with stun guns. The team would probably think it was on a drug bust. Strathmore would undoubtedly stride through the rubble himself and locate the 64-character passkey. Then he would destroy it. Digital Fortress would languish forever on the internet, locked for all eternity. Send the tracer carefully, Strathmore urged. If North Dakota sees we're onto him, he'll panic, and I'll never get a team there before he disappears with the key. Hit and run, she assured. The moment this thing finds his account, it'll dissolve. He'll never know we were there. No, we were there. The commander nodded tiredly. Thanks. Susan gave him a soft smile. She was always amazed how, even in the face of disaster, Strathmore could muster a quiet calm. She was convinced it was this ability that had defined his career and lifted him to the upper echelons of power. As Susan headed for the door, she took a long look down at Translator. The existence of an unbreakable algorithm was a concept she was still struggling to grasp. She prayed they'd find North Dakota in time. Make it quick, Strathmore called, and you'll be in the Smoky Mountains by nightfall. Susan froze in her tracks. She knew she had never mentioned her trip to Strathmore. She wheeled. Is the NSA tapping my phone? Strathmore smiled guiltily. David told me about your trip this morning. He said you'd be pretty ticked about postponing it. Susan was lost. You talked to David this morning? Of course. Strathmore seemed puzzled by Susan's reaction. I had to brief him. Brief him? She demanded. For what? For his trip. I sent David to Spain.